How many PDFs do you have? You probably have a lot of PDFs that you don't even read, and that's Jupiter and Gemini. Jupiter and Gemini is the free PDF that you never read, but you need it because we need a lot of information. Even if we don't incorporate it into our overall worldview, it's just nice to know that the information is there. If you go to hellington.net/Jupiter and sign up for my emails, you can get a free PDF about Jupiter and Gemini. It has the past dates of Jupiter and Gemini and what it means for your sign. Right now is a really good time to begin your written gratitude practice. A gratitude practice is something that can elevate your life. Anytime I've managed to sustain a daily gratitude practice for a long period of time, those have been the best periods of time in my life. And there are a lot of ways to do a gratitude practice, but with Jupiter and Gemini, a written one would be great. Or even just like telling someone how much you value them. But tell them keep it light, keep it cute. Don't get too sappy. Maybe send them like a funny card. I'm going to allow this Jupiter and Gemini presentation to kind of be all over the place because that's what we're working with here. We're working with a lot of information. It's going to be maybe a little difficult to parse. Something that Jupiter needs and produces is coherence. And it has a hard time doing that in Gemini, constantly getting different takes from different people and just kind of flitting from flower to flower. An important feature of this Jupiter transit is the idea in astrology of opposition. So Gemini is opposite Sagittarius, which is Jupiter's home sign. And so Jupiter is considered in detriment in the sign of Gemini because the zodiac is a beautiful mathematical diagram where the archetypal significations of each sign of the zodiac are not just like their own contained thing. They mean what they mean because of their relationship with the other signs. So Gemini takes its meaning from its relationship to the other air signs, Aquarius and Libra, just as it also takes its meaning from the mutable cross, that is Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo. And it also is a piece of a greater whole, because that's what these things I'm talking about are, in relation to just fire signs and air signs in general. So Gemini is opposite the fire sign Sagittarius, and it is sextile the fire signs Aries and Leo. Because fire needs air to go. So those elements help each other. Just like water and earth signs, you can make mud to build something. So astrology is a system that explains the structure of all of reality. Anyway, the idea of opposition. So where Jupiter is headed, where Jupiter is going to be for the next year, is in the opposite place of where it likes to be. And so something else it's doing is like, it's bringing its blessings, although in kind of a diluted or difficult way. It's going to bring what it brings to the place in your chart that is opposite of the place that it rules. Rhetorius, the Egyptian astrologer, has said abundance is opposed to logic. And this precisely describes Jupiter's relationship with Mercury and how Jupiter's signs are opposite Mercury's signs. And something I immediately think of are distributions of wealth or problems with distribution of wealth. Something I immediately think of when I think of that quote is the EXXON Valdez oil spill occurred whilst Jupiter was in Gemini. And this was a great store of wealth that was suddenly all over the place. Gemini is kind of all over the place. Wealth requires some coherence to hold. And wealth is something different than commerce, which is Mercury's realm. So this opposition between wealth and stores of wealth and actions of commerce. Commerce produces wealth, which illustrates the opposition of Mercury signs and Jupiter signs. But they're not the same thing. And this year they're going to try to be the same thing, but they're not. The main thing I think that's going to go on this year, given the other transits coming up, like Uranus in Gemini, which will begin summer of 2025, Jupiter's transit of Gemini, which is happening right before that. It's like Jupiter in Gemini, and then Jupiter goes into Cancer, and then like a few weeks later, Uranus goes into Gemini. I think there's going to be a lot of hype around blockchain and cryptocurrency, and that being, in quote, decentralization, being a vector of freedom and liberty, even though I personally, and I'm not the only one, find that a bit of it like a disingenuous framing of those technologies. So there's going to be a lot of hype around like money. So cryptocurrency is money, but is it a store of wealth? I think that's a really good question for Jupiter in Gemini. There's going to be so much hype around it. There is a US presidential candidate whose main job in this circus, as Frank Zappa said, politics are the entertainment division of the military-industrial complex. There's a US presidential candidate whose main deal in this narrative is just to hype blockchain, except it's more like hyping data privacy, which is really a digital ID. If you want to know more about this, watch my video about token engineering. So cryptocurrency is just basically like a thing, in my opinion, to allure people to blockchain, which is a permanent digital ledger, and it's going to be data privacy to make you feel okay with doing things online. But if you want some sort of assistance or if you need approval from someone, you'll be compelled to share all that data you've been logging on your digital ID. It's all centralized. Also, just the general tokenization of life is like free market. That's like all cryptocurrency, digital currency is all about signals intelligence to train AI. We need more data. And then there are also things like the social impact bond markets where like nonprofits, in order to fund things, we need to measure their impact. So we need to surveil everything. And then there are bond markets created on top of those. So you can bet on whether or not like this disadvantaged child is going to graduate from university and get a really good job, or they're going to go to jail. You could like short a disadvantaged child. Jupiter in Gemini is going to raise a lot of awareness of like artificial intelligence, tokenization. They're not going to call it that though. It's going to be like decentralization and cryptocurrency. And it's going to be framed as freedom and liberty. And it's going to be really exciting. And that's going to spur Uranus in Gemini when like the money really starts to change. In the first part of Gemini, it's going to really like amplify your options. It's going to be really exciting to have a lot of options. And it's going to be really hard to choose one thing or a low enough number of things that you can actually accomplish something. So just watch out for being all over the place. Everybody's going to be all over the place. It's the way, it's what's going to happen. But if you know that that's what's happening, you can maybe mitigate that in a way that you can make more useful to you. So what time it is for the next year? Time to be all over the place. Buckle in. It's going to be one hell of a Gemini season, which begins now, if you're watching this right when I post it. So there's going to be a lot of excitement about technology, and specifically the technologies I've been talking about, like blockchain. Archetype of Jupiter, especially in Sagittarius, which is opposite Gemini, you need to wander. You need to be free and wander. The way Gemini does that is by checking in with other people and getting other people's opinions. So the way we're going to wander is by takes. You're going to have too many. You're going to have to do the Jupiter thing of like kind of learning by osmosis and like keeping things coherent. It's really hard for Jupiter to get to like achieve coherence in Gemini, which is a divided sign. We look at what Gemini is, it's two beings. And a part of the Gemini story is that they were separated. One of them died. So one of them is alive and one is in the underworld. Gemini it amplifies the separation. Something that Sagittarius does. Sagittarius is a man and a horse fused into one mythical creature. It's one out of two. If you think about wealth and the Sagittarius archetype, two things melded into one magically. So one other major theme of how to take advantage of Jupiter and Gemini is to use your curiosity to spur your growth mindset. So where if Saturn represents a fixed mindset of like pessimism and like, I can't do this, and Jupiter is like, yes, we can. Curiosity is one way to get out of that. Get out of the low vibration of the fixed mindset. You know, there's a difference between being practical and being just like pessimistic. And with Jupiter squaring Saturn, it might be easier for pessimism to win, but if you just keep engaging your curiosity, that could be helpful. One thing that might be difficult to have with Jupiter and Gemini is like discernment, or there might be too much discernment. so much discernment that it's difficult to like keep the faith, to hold the wealth. So we're trying to do too much and we're wrangling with contradictions. And either we're gonna like blow it because there are too many options, or we'll manage to reduce the available options to a small enough number that we can actually like achieve some forward motion. Something Jupiter and Gemini reminds me of is PDF, OCR, optical character recognition. We're taking a book, the book was already written, we could read it, but now we're going to use a computer, and the computer's going to read it, and it's going to turn it back into text that we can read, or that an AI can read and then summarize. That's Jupiter and Gemini. Let's talk a little bit about the Jupiter cycle. I talked about that in my video last week, the one called Best Week Ever, which is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but also it's very good astrology. I did not have the best week ever, which I described at length in that video. I'll describe it at length again here. So on May 25th, Jupiter enters Gemini. Jupiter will be in Gemini until June 9th, 2025. So that's May 25th, 2024 through June 9th, 2025. And the ingress, it happens just after the full moon in Sagittarius. So this contrast is really heightened. Like the full moon, what the full moon wants to bring is going to then it's going to bring it into the opposite place immediately. And you're going to deal with that tension between opposites, but also opposites support each other. Like if you think of the axis between the 10th house and the 4th house in astrology, the 10th house is your profession, and you can do that much better if you have a solid, satisfying, supportive foundation in the 4th house. Jupiter in Gemini is squaring Neptune by sign. The exact aspect isn't going to happen until Jupiter is in Cancer and Neptune is in Aries. But right now, Jupiter is moving into Gemini, or maybe it already is if you're watching this later. And Neptune is finishing up its transit of Pisces. So now there's going to be like a little more tension between, there's a lot of thinking and talking. Maybe we're not thinking about the big picture. We can't see the forest for the trees because we're like going up to each individual tree and we're talking to it. And maybe we don't even know we're in a forest, except maybe we're imagining we're like somewhere else. So one big signature of this transit is that it's squaring Neptune. And when the big changes start to happen, summer of next year, that's when that's going to like culminate to precision, tension. That's like our imagination and like expansion. There's going to be like a problem there with maybe like too much optimism or too much idealism or letting our imaginations run away with us. Or there's not enough like hope and faith to keep the vision alive. Also, Jupiter is going to start squaring Saturn. There are 3 squares with Saturn. One of them is in 2025. And this is like, so the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which happened at the very end of 2020, was correlated with like rollouts of important medical innovations and the subsequent attempts to enforce compliance with those important medical innovations. And when Jupiter conjoins Saturn, typically those are difficult years. And the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020 marked the beginning of a new era. So this will be a difficult chapter in that era. Jupiter, our faith and coherence and optimism and winds, the world saying yes, clashing. It's Clash of the Titans. Clashing with authority figures, pessimism, and Saturn in Pisces isn't like, it's ruled by Jupiter in Gemini, so that's kind of a mess. Saturn isn't like in detriment or anything. It doesn't have any like particular good or bad dignity in Pisces, except that it's ruled by Jupiter in detriment. So that's kind of an interesting tension. It's like we're gonna get dragged along by authority, the authority story, and things pertaining to boundaries, where the vision is headed, and authority narratives that pertain to vision, whether that's like a broader vision or actual technology vision, like imaging. and all these other options for things that are really exciting. And all the PDFs you have, like, you just want to read those, but you gotta like get things done because Saturn wants to like see where the cracks are. We're trying to like accomplish our goals, but we're being tested. Everything we were doing in Taurus, we're gonna like get outside and talk to everyone, but it's not the end all be all. It's a transitional period. All these changes happen next year just after this Jupiter and Gemini transit. The other part of this transit is Jupiter's synodic cycle. So Jupiter has just conjoined the Sun in Taurus, May 18th, 2024. So that's like a week before Jupiter enters Gemini. And then, so this is like a forward thinking time of like, what do we want? And who believes in us? And who's gonna like, what noblemen are gonna offer us assistance or endorse our campaign to explore new worlds, instead we're just like maybe exploring new neighborhoods. The end of May 2024 through October 9th, 2024 is that, what I was just saying. And then October 9th, 2024 through February 4th, 2025, Jupiter is retrograde. So that's a time where like, okay, you got some inspiration from all the PDFs you downloaded but never read, all the books you bought but never read. And that's like a good example of like Jupiter and Mercury sign, commerce, buying things, and then just like not ever using them. But you got to you got to use that information. If you don't, you're not going to reap any rewards or get any recognition. So October 9th through February 4th, we're making good on the inspiration and benefits we received. And in the middle of that period, there's the second square with Saturn. It'll be challenging. Jupiter retrograde, making good on the benefits during Jupiter retrograde isn't always challenging, but this one will be uniquely challenging. It'll be just easy to like drop the ball and like forget it, come back to things weeks later and be like, what have I been doing? I had a vision and I've just been like talking to my friends. A resource you might want to check out that has helped me recently is a book called The 12-Week Year. Oh, you think you have a whole year to do things, and that normally brings like some idealism, some Jupiterian idealism, and then you don't do them because a year is too long. So this is the 12-week year, and it helps you like condense your goals into a 12-week period. So there's a book you can buy and never read. Get the audiobook and then search online for the free PDFs. That's what I did, except I actually used them. So many things happened like right after Jupiter leaves Gemini. So again, this is a transitional period. When Jupiter enters Cancer, it squares Saturn for the third time, it squares Neptune exactly, finally, and it conjoins the Sun. This is a very transitional time, especially if you're a very Jupiter-ruled person. And when Jupiter moves into Cancer later, Jupiter is exalted. So it's a transitional time. We're going to step through a lot of change. It's going to be really challenging. The change is going to be challenging. And Jupiter is going to continue to square Saturn by sign the whole time through Cancer. But like, prepare and stay focused as much as you can. Enjoy the all over the place-ness, but try to keep your eyes on the prize, because the prize is potentially big, even though it's also scary and full of change. We're entering the new world, part 2, if like 2020 was like entering new world, part 1, because that was the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. This is the opening square. Jupiter transits Gemini every 12 years. The last time Jupiter was in Gemini was June of 2012 through June of 2013. And the time before that was June of 2000 through July of 2001. So I see things going on with like graphical user interfaces and how we interact with things with our hands, because that's like Gemini. So there'll also be like, I don't know, I think the way that we interact with machines, there's going to be something up with that, because Jupiter and Gemini, they're like arms and legs. Gemini in ancient texts is considered freestanding. One other interesting thing is Jupiter is associated with fertility, and Gemini is considered a barren or sterile sign. And something interesting I discovered is the first test tube baby, the first child born from in vitro fertilization, that happened when Jupiter was in Cancer. Like at the beginning of the Jupiter in Cancer transit, the in vitro fertilization occurred. And at the end, the first test tube baby was born. So this technology was under development and being refined while Jupiter was in Gemini. So it is like, it's not making a baby the way God intended or whatever, but like, if we're doing it, perhaps God intends it. And that's like an interesting way to think about Jupiter in detriment, still bringing blessings. It brings blessings in fertility through the barren and sterile sign, and then once it goes into Cancer, that's Jupiter in the sign of its exaltation and like maximum fertility. So I found that interesting, that tension of like what Jupiter represents and how Gemini is an environment that's not really conducive to that, but together we can be like, well, this is what we have to work with, so let's try it. And Sagittarius is a bestial sign. There is like a little more instinct going on there, whereas Gemini is a human sign, and it's very rational. It's about connecting the dots. There's like some space exploration things. There are just like some scientific things going on with Jupiter and Gemini in the past. So the Viking 2 spacecraft landed on Mars, September of 1976, and the Mars rover Curiosity, which is an amazing name for Jupiter and Gemini. Viking 2 spacecraft landed on Mars in September of 1976, and the Mars rover Curiosity landed on Mars in August of 2012. So maybe there'll be something regarding Mars. There's just been so much going on with like, we need to go out into space. And my take is that that's to create a distraction with like what the real technology is, which is like spiritual, it's like social computing, it's using signals intelligence to teach AI, signals intelligence and like teaming of humans, even if you don't know you're doing it. Again, I keep mentioning Sephora Kids as a really good example. Whether or not that was engineered, it's a very good example of like technology bringing people together and causing like these hive mind swarms. So space stuff. Also the first like modern known Westerner recorded history people to ascend Mount Everest happened when Jupiter was in Gemini. Anne Frank was born with Jupiter in Gemini. She was born on the day of the ingress. A well-known writer who inspired so many people, but it was such a terrible situation. Despite being confined and having to hide from people who want to kill you, finding all this inspiration, that's Jupiter in detriment. Jupiter is always somewhere, but she gave so many readers hope, even though she was in a horrible situation. So Jupiter was in Gemini when the Bolshevik Revolution led to the creation of the Soviet Union. And that's very interesting because there's a lot of Russia stuff that's correlated with Saturn-Neptune signatures. And now we have Jupiter transiting Gemini as Saturn is grinding closer and closer to Neptune. So expect Russia stuff to like ramp up. It's already starting to crank up. Something had happened in July of 1965. Jupiter was at the end of Gemini when Bob Dylan decided at a folk festival to do an electric set, which everyone called him a traitor. So there's some, I think maybe there'll be some interesting uses of technology by people who are maybe like culturally considered to not like supposed to be using technology that way, which could cause like, with Pluto and Aquarius and everything happening around technology and teaming to create emergent intelligence, I think anybody's like controversial decision to use technology in a certain way, although we're used to them being positioned to not do that, something around that could end up being like particularly divisive because Jupiter is trining Pluto. So the Jupiter and Gemini story helps the Pluto and Aquarius stuff. Like I said earlier, I think just Jupiter and Gemini by itself is going to create a lot of hype around how the money is changing, how we do commerce is changing. We're doing commerce, but are we holding wealth? One thing that happened in June, so Jupiter is like publicity and like could also be like propaganda, but the original term propaganda was like, I think, connected to the Catholic Church, and it meant like just spreading the good news, getting the word out. In June of 1989, the Tiananmen Square protests were suppressed violently. So like getting the general message out, it wasn't allowed to. It was just curtailed. I think that's interesting in terms of like Jupiter's connection with propaganda and marketing. Star Wars also came out during a Jupiter in Gemini transit, and it was also Neptune in Sagittarius. I really correlate Star Wars, that story, with Neptune in Sagittarius. It's like really going beyond, like out into outer space. But I think the Jupiter and Gemini part created a lot of excitement around new technologies regarding like exploration. So since Neptune was in Sagittarius during that time, May 1977, the excitement around the new technology was like around like communications and exploration of other worlds. So Sagittarius. Something that's kind of interesting, I know it's not like the only blackout, but there was like an epic blackout in New York City in 1977. Summer of 1977, it was 25 hours, and there was like a lot of civil unrest and like looting. Which again, Jupiter is like holding wealth, and this was like, instead of engaging in the commerce, it was like stealing, which is also like a Mars thing. But Barack Obama was reelected in November of 2012, and his slogan that campaign was just forward. I love that for Jupiter and Gemini. Like, we're moving in a direction. It's like information. It's Gemini. So it's not necessarily like all that inspiring, like Sagittarius, like giving some like mythical, it's just like, we're going this way. That's what we're doing. It's information. That's it. We're going from here to here. There are other things I could talk about, but this video is getting too long. It's too much information. J.K. Rowling has Jupiter and Gemini. If we think of like school stuff, magic in elementary school. However, also, Jupiter also does weird death things sometimes. Especially if Jupiter is connected to the 8th house of the inception of something. So something horrible happened at an elementary school with Jupiter and Gemini. Oh, and the Higgs boson particle was discovered at CERN in Switzerland in July of 2012. It was such an amazing thing. Everybody was talking about it, and if you talked about the Higgs boson particle on social media in 2012, it was like, oh, I'm so smart. But nobody knows what it is. I don't know what it is. Maybe I knew what it was for like 2 seconds, but I forgot. And that's Jupiter and Gemini. Everyone's a big, profound nerd, but nobody knows what it means. My favorite Jupiter and Gemini thing, Gangnam Style, was uploaded to YouTube July 15th, 2012. It quickly became the first YouTube video to reach 1 billion views. Now it has over 5 billion views. I've heard he still sells out arenas with that one song. I haven't looked at his chart. I should. I was wondering if he had Jupiter and Gemini. And something that MIT Technology Review wrote about, I think, about this music video, and I got this from the book Recapture the Rapture by Jamie Wheel. Geographic distance is not the key factor in the spread of information over social networks. This is a very interesting comment in how Jupiter brings kind of like a bigness to these social connections. The other thing about Gangnam Style is that it is a funny music video about wealth. So we're gonna make fun of wealth, we're gonna go to space, we're gonna get all hyped up on the freedom potential of decentralization, which is really blockchain, which is really like, it's a chain. We're gonna get all excited to get in chains, and we don't even know if we're holding wealth anymore. We're just like changing money, which is signals intelligence, which is really exciting because it's gonna train AI, and some stuff's gonna happen with Russia, and some stuff's gonna happen with Mars. And also in September of 1976, NASA was like, here's the Space Shuttle, which was kind of it didn't go well. That program didn't go well, but that was super exciting at the time. And it was called Enterprise, which is a very Jupiter name. So I'll just go through quickly what all of this means for your sign. So for instance, if you are Gemini rising, anything that Jupiter is ever doing in the sky, and thus through the instrument being played by the giant clock we live in, the instrument that is your chart, the giant clock we live in plays that as an instrument. One of the hands of the clock is Jupiter, and if you're Gemini rising, anything Jupiter does anywhere represents 7th house of significant one-on-one relationships. So like if you're in a marriage, if you're in a significant romantic relationship, it also just represents other people, and it represents relationships that are significant of any kind. Also, if you're Gemini rising, Jupiter represents your 10th house of career. So anything Jupiter ever does is going to have something to do with your profession, what you give to the world according to what you've been given, work stuff you do that offers you status, and significant one-on-one relationships, whether that's romantic or not. Jupiter is always, those things are always connected for you if you're Gemini rising or if you have a lot of Gemini in your chart. And so as an example, Jupiter, ruler of your 7th house, is in your 1st. So there's something about like these things are deeply integrated right now. And on the one hand, Jupiter is in detriment. So there's a possibility, if you're Gemini rising, I'll get into this later in the video, that like relationships, although still like they're always going to be uplifting and going to like bring some sense of coherence to your worldview and optimism, there's something that's a little like, it's not popping off as much as it could be. And it has to do with you. Because like you're wanting to be Jupiter, but you're not Jupitering very well because Gemini isn't a very Jupiter-y. These things they're conflicting. So it's an interesting and complicated transit this year of Jupiter in regards to contrast and tension and opposition. Gemini, wow, how exciting. You got Jupiter moving through your 1st house. You might gain some weight, but Jupiter rules your 7th house of significant relationships. So that's like if you're married, you're in a romantic relationship. And it also rules your 4th house of like your family, your living situation. So there's something about like that's all entangled with like the people you live with or the people in your family, your relationship with the people in your family, and you. It's all very like, it's like you're like me. I don't remember who said this on Twitter a long time ago, so forgive me. And if you're the one who said it, please comment. But also, there was only like a select few people on Twitter in like 2018, so I feel like it would be a voice I recognize. I just don't remember who said it, but they were like, what's up with Gemini being Diet Leo? So it's very like the me show. It's me, except you're in your family, you're in your house, you're with other people, house, other people, and it's very like a lot. Whereas normally you're just like, I'm telling the information and I'm being funny. You might be like very inspiring to others, very inspiring to your family, very like bringing the goodness to your living situation or your relationships. And then also wherever Jupiter is natally for you, it'll have something to do with that. If you're a Cancer, Jupiter is going to transit your 12th house. So all this is going to kind of like undermine you somehow. You're like being all over the place is going to undermine something. It's a very spiritual place, the 12th house, and Jupiter is a very spiritual planet, but your spirituality is like, it's rational, it's factual, and so there might be like too much expansion for you to like wrangle. And Jupiter rules your 6th house and your 9th house, so something about work and something about your worldview come together in this like dark place. They come together behind your back. Also something about pets. Upkeep and admin, employment and pets, injuries, open enemies. Jupiter always has something to do with that for you. And philosophy, religion, academia, long distance travel. So maybe don't take a trip. Maybe you take a trip and it like undermines you somehow, or somebody undermines you on a trip. Or maybe you don't travel and you don't get that time to yourself and then you're all scatterbrained. Like, you need downtime. Cancer. Cancer rising, Cancer sun, Cancer moon if you're born at night. Leo, Jupiter is going to transit through your 11th house. So this like expands your groups of friends. It's super inspiring. You're talking to everybody. Maybe you're getting out. Maybe you're like, it's very social. And Jupiter for you always has something to do with like how you have fun. So this is going to be really fun depending on what's going on in your 5th house natally. Oh, I forgot to mention for everybody, Jupiter also has something to do with wherever Jupiter is in your chart. And if you don't know that, you can go to and sign up for my emails and get my free course on how to read your own chart. So Leo, super fun, super social, very inspiring. Jupiter has something to do with like your 5th house of like creative energy, fun, romance, sexual encounters, also children because sexual encounters produce children, but it's also like the place of play and like children in general, yours or other people's. And you can see how it's like the 5th house is a really fun place. Jupiter rules fun for you, and also gambling. And then your 8th house of shared resources. So that's collaborations. It's like complicated territory because it's like collaborations. It's how you like are entangled with others, and that could result in power struggles and be complicated, but it's Jupiter, so maybe it won't be. But so there'll be like collaborations with others, and it'll be fun, and it might be complicated. And the 8th house is also the place of death because it's about shared resources. Our body is a shared resource. It's death, it's debt. That Benjamin Franklin quote about the things that are inevitable, death and taxes. That's the 8th house. You can see how all those things go together. And wherever Jupiter is in your chart. Virgo, Jupiter will transit through your 10th house of profession. So Jupiter has undue influence in your chart, except it's Jupiter in detriment. And Jupiter doesn't represent you, it represents other people. So maybe other people in your life are having like career success. That might be kind of frustrating. That's Jupiter in detriment at the top of your chart. Other people are having success. It's very prominent. So like I said, Jupiter rules your 7th house of other people, significant others, and significant relationships in general. And it also rules your 4th house of foundations. So maybe someone you live with, or something's going on with your living situation that's really beneficial, or something's going on with your family that's like very uplifting. Libra, Jupiter's going to transit through your 9th house of like your worldview, academia, spirituality, religion, publishing, and long distance travel. It's how you get, it's a very Jupiterian place. They're not the same thing, Jupiter in the 9th house, but they share some like similarities. So that's going to be super inspiring, but just be careful. That's going to be like all over the place. And Jupiter rules your 3rd house and your 6th house. So there's going to be a lot of communication, a lot of thinking and talking, a lot of like your schedule, a lot of like bigness, expansion of your schedule. Maybe you're going to be very busy, and maybe you're going to be very busy at work because Jupiter also rules your 6th house of like upkeep, admin, getting things done, your to-do list, the stuff that you need to do so that shit doesn't fall apart. And that's like going to work, employment, paying the bills, cleaning your house. And it's also pets, any animals you take care of. And it's also illness and injuries, because if you're not doing that upkeep and admin, then it's the type of illness and injuries that, you know, if you get injured, you haven't been building strength. Maybe like you can build as much strength as you want and still get injured, but like it pushes beyond like what your body's prepared to deal with. Or like an illness, it's the type of illness that like there's stuff you can do over time to make sure you don't fall ill, to protect your body as an immune system. And that's the 6th house. Scorpio, Jupiter's going to transit through your 8th house. So that's, I mean, Jupiter in the 8th brings things like inheritance. It makes collaborations particularly inspiring, but it's Gemini and Jupiter rules your 2nd house. So maybe you're bringing the money to the table and sharing it with someone else. So like I said, Jupiter rules your 2nd house of money, and it rules your 5th house of fun, creativity, children, sexual encounters, romance, art, gambling. Maybe you get gambling winnings, or maybe you lose money gambling. Do you feel lucky, Scorpio? And then wherever Jupiter is in your chart. Sagittarius, Jupiter will transit through your 7th house. And Jupiter represents you. So there's something like this entanglement with others, and your Jupiter, and maybe the tension, it's Jupiter in detriment, is like the other person's Jupiter too. So you're like trying to do the same thing and butting heads, or trying to be inspiring in the same way, and like, but it could also just mean that like your relationships are particularly great right now. But since your 7th house is Gemini, what you want from other people is like to talk to them, just someone to be rational, and you're the like wise, inspiring one. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of people, a lot of relationships, a lot of options, and go to town. Don't lose yourself in the process. Don't flit from flower to flower. There's a way to be like too social where you like blow off people that are important to you, and that's Jupiter and Gemini in the 7th. Jupiter also rules your 4th house. So there's something about like your living situation or your family. Maybe your relationships with your family are particularly like very inspiring and positive right now, or they have the potential to be. Or there's something about significant relationships, one or many, maybe at least 2, that make your living situation contribute to that like baseline that you have as a Sagittarius rising person, of like your living situation being ruled by Jupiter, which is like overall inspiring and good. Capricorn, Jupiter is going to transit through your 6th house. So that's like, work is good. If you're employed, it's good. You can get things done. Or maybe you can't get things done because you have so many things to do and you're so excited to get all these things done that like you end up being scattered. So just watch out for that. Or like maybe you adopt too many pets, or just like the type of injuries, maybe you get injured, but it's all good in the end. It's a weird place. It's the place ancient texts called the place of bad fortune, and Jupiter's coming through. So a place that's normally like kind of Cinderella is going to be great, but just watch out for too many options. And Jupiter has something to do in your chart with your 3rd house, which is like your schedule. So maybe your work schedule is kind of all over the place. Like brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, so siblings, aunts and uncles, your neighborhood, how you communicate. And then Jupiter also rules your 12th house of how you undermine yourself. So maybe you say something weird at work. Maybe you talk too much at work and it gets you in trouble. Or maybe one of your siblings gets you in trouble at work. Maybe you undermine yourself by some sort of, you're overscheduled and that ends up undermining you at work. When the 12th house is up, get your downtime. You got to get the intentional downtime, otherwise you're going to go to jail. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Aquarius, Jupiter is going to transit your 5th house. So the 5th house is like creativity, romance, social encounters, and Jupiter is the place of fertility, and the 5th house is the place of like pregnancy and children. So there's that. And Jupiter rules your 2nd house of money, income that you earn for yourself, food. Maybe there's just like a lot of food. Maybe you go out to eat with someone, because Jupiter also rules your 11th house of community, friends, followers. So maybe you like are out with a bunch of friends eating and you have a romance and you get pregnant, or a child results. That's one example of many. If you want to understand all the houses, you can get my free course on how to read your own chart. It's long. I know you probably just met me and you don't want to watch like 12 videos that I made, but eventually I'm going to sunset the freeness of that course and do something else with it, and maybe just make a little cheat sheet PDF. So take advantage of that while you can. If you don't understand the houses in astrology. Pisces, Jupiter is going to move through your 4th house. It's Jupiter in detriment in your 4th. So I don't know what that means. Maybe you have 2 houses, but there's some sort of tension. Or Jupiter rules your 10th house of career and your 1st house of self. So like maybe you're at home doing career stuff and you're making the best of whatever the situation is. Maybe you're working from home. Your body is in your house and you're working from home. There's also Jupiter's in your 4th house, so you're maybe something about your family and your career is like particularly beneficial, or it's in opposition. Maybe there's some tension, but it works out in the end because it's Jupiter. And then wherever Jupiter is in your chart natally, it'll have something to do with that. Aries, Jupiter will transit through your 3rd house. This is your schedule. This has to do with siblings. This has to do with your neighborhood. This has to do with like, it's like your schedule. So, your neighborhood, it's like the coffee shop, the people that you know at the coffee shop you go to. It's your brothers and sisters. It's your aunts and uncles. It's how you communicate. It's like, it's not exactly social media, but it's when you like get on, when you like, whatever time that is in the morning that you like get on Instagram and start talking. That's 3rd housing. It's like if the 9th house, the opposite place, is like your worldview or long distance travel. The 3rd house is like your daily itinerary and what you do with that, how your worldview informs like what you say to people and what you do with that knowledge. And Jupiter always has something to do with your worldview, the opposite place. And also your 12th house of like, it's secret enemies, it's how you're undermined, it's how you undermine yourself. So again, there's something about your worldview and how you use it might end up undermining you, or someone else in like your neighbor might undermine you somehow. But it all works out because it's Jupiter, I hope. So again, the 12th house connected to any transit is like, get your downtime. Jupiter rules your 12th. So upliftment through downtime. You're in Aries, so you probably want to like go. And so Jupiter in Gemini wants to do that too. It's kind of all over the place. So just make sure you get some quiet time to reflect. Because if you don't, you might be forced to reflect by like, the 12th house is hermitage and retreat, intentional retreat. It's also places like prison and hospitals and mental institutions. So there's like intentional ways you can use any sort of energy. Lastly, Taurus, Jupiter will transit through your second house of your money and your stuff and food, things that you own, income that you earn for yourself, and food that you eat. Because like, it's material resources that support your life. Maybe you buy too many things. This is kind of good because could be like, you're getting more money. Where's the money coming from? Wherever Jupiter is in your chart and wherever Mercury is in your chart, because your second house is Mercury ruled. So that's information that has to come from your chart. So I don't know what that is because I don't know you, or maybe I do. Jupiter rules your 8th house of shared resources. So maybe you're getting money from an inheritance. Maybe you're contributing money to, maybe you, the 8th house is death. So that could be, it's Jupiter, it's a benefic, so death benefits. It's also collaborations, it's shared bank accounts. I'm saying, look, it's not scary. The 8th house is death because the 8th house is shared resources. So it's what Benjamin Franklin said was like inevitable. Death and taxes, debt, inheritance. These are all shared resources. The 8th house is also collaboration, energetic awareness, and accounting. And it's resources we share with the earth, which that's what our body is. We're going to return our body to the earth. The 8th house is often just like tax stuff, inheritance stuff, collaborations. It's other people's money, shared bank accounts. So Jupiter rules your 8th house and your 11th house of like groups of friends, community, colleagues. It's like your followers. It's not really social media, but it's like your groups of followers or your audience. Money, whether that's like someone giving you money, gifts, or some sort of collaboration with someone in your groups of friends. Maybe a friend gives you money or you give money to a friend. And that's it. Thank you for watching. This has been quite a ride, and this year will be quite a ride. It's very transitional. Remember, your Wi-Fi is a camera that can see through walls, and have fun.